Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast Our Human Experiences, the podcast where we delve into generational trauma by talking about our genuine human stories. So, this week we have with us Sphinx, aka Circle DM, for those of you who know him on TikTok. Welcome in.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm super happy to be here.
It's great to have you. Today we'll be talking about what it's been like for him to grow up in the South as a person of color. And in the military background. So when you were talking to me about this, you were saying how because your parents were involved in the military, you grew up sheltered in New Orleans.
Actually, that's my parents are not did not come up in the military. I do not. If I did say that at some point, it was probably an error. My parents they were never military. They liked to, or at least my dad liked to invoke very militaristic ideals.
Okay.
But neither of my parents were ever in the military.
Oh, well, so yeah. Why do you think it was that your parents kind of dealt with you in that way?
A lot of it, I think, stems from their experiences growing up. Both my parents grew up in households with multiple children without a father. My mom was the youngest of, like, I want to say 8 in total, and my dad was
Wow.
the middle child of three full siblings with his mom and a few other siblings, half siblings through his father. And while I don't know the full details, like, I know they saw and went through quite a bit as a result. My mom being a caregiver to, not just some of my nieces and nephews as they came through and went from the house, but in later years, my grandmother. And, my dad having to help raise his younger brother, and also having to watch over a couple of his half siblings. I feel like their experiences in that way shaped kind of who they would become as parents and caregivers.
Right. That's understandable.
Yeah.
So, outside of having that kind of very sheltered lifestyle from, I wouldn't necessarily call it helicopter parenting, but just, more strict involved parenting.
Yeah.
You were telling me that it kind of led you to not have like a lot of social interactions outside of school.
Yeah, so my parents were very, very cautious about the people I hung out with. We lived in New Orleans East in the 90s, my being a teenager. And it was not a terrible neighborhood, but it was not a great one either. And so a lot of the friends that I made in both, like, middle school and high school lived, like, clear across town. We didn't have a car, and they did not trust many of the kids around our neighborhood.
Right.
The neighborhood being what it was.
You were telling me about how the racial dynamic of where you grew up kind of led it to be kind of like living on the other side of the tracks.
Yeah, it definitely felt like that a lot of the times, especially kind of in our general area. Like, we lived in an apartment complex for up until, I want to say, from about 4th grade up until my freshman year of college, and it was like there were some decent people in the complex, but there were also a lot of can we curse on this show?
Yes.
There are a lot of assholes. There's a lot of assholes.
Clearly you've never lived in New York.
No. my mother was actually was born in New York, so she's told me stories.
I'm sure she has.
It's been, or it was rather, a interesting experience. We had people who were like starting out, business owners that lived in the complex, and then we had uh, I guess the kids would call it kind of like a trap house,
Hmm.
where it's just a bunch of young kids living together, pretty much doing what they could to survive. If I mean, and that could range from anything between working 3 or 4 jobs to selling drugs or whatever,
Right.
and that definitely caused a lot of weirdness within the complex, and it caused my parents to be fairly concerned about who I associated with. So I uh, tended to not really go outside much.
Hmm.
And I mean, at that point in my life, like I really did not want for any other interaction outside of like the kids I was friends with at school, or
Hmm.
uh, just it we entered that kind of at around the time where like kids are apt to kind of like just hang out in their rooms all the time anyway.
Hmm.
And I was taught the value of like literature and art at a young age, and I had a plethora of books to read and things to do in my room. So I was never really aware of how sheltered I was until I was aware of how sheltered I was.
Yeah, that does tend to happen. Do you think that, this had any relevancy towards your parents' religious affiliations?
I think to some degree, my mom growing up Baptist, my dad growing up very Catholic, it definitely influenced quite a few aspects of uh, what I did and who I was allowed access to and what I was allowed access to, which
Hmm.
is kind of like weird now looking back on it. There were like several like my nerddom is derived from both my parents. Like my mom, both my parents like hardcore Trek fans, both into like sci-fi and fantasy. And so we watched a lot of those like dark fantasy films from the 80s, like a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Legend and Legend, oh shoot, The Last Unicorn,
Hmm.
Labyrinth, Willow, all that stuff, right?
Right.
And yet, uh, when I got into Magic the Gathering in high school, my dad was so like superstitious about it that he honestly, I think, believed that by playing Magic the Gathering, I could summon the things uh, that were printed on the card. And I'm like, what? Like that
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah. I
you
mean,
introduced me to tabletop role playing games and D and actually fighting demons, and that's what.
yeah, no, to be quite honest, that is a very surprising thing about your story is how your parents like groomed you into this like heavy nerd culture during the height of satanic panic. And
Absolutely,
yet, Magic the Gathering, that was the thing.
that was the
That's where the
thing.
line was drawn.
Yeah, apparently it was like, well, okay, that's a weird like would play all kinds of weird video games and stuff like that, and they would my dad would come and play too, and it was fun and it was cool, but Magic the Gathering somehow was of Satan. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up, my father was like, he was born when my grandfather was like 50, if
Hmm.
not older. So like he was groomed underneath this like pre-boomer mentality. So my
Hmm.
dad by all means is very like heavy boomer energy,
Yeah, yeah.
and like all technology was the Satan when I was a kid. Uh
Gotcha. Yeah.
like the internet itself was a necessary evil. We only had cable TV for a short period before it was all about, oh, this media is trying to indoctrinate my children, all
Sure.
that business. But you were spending a lot of time at school,
Hmm.
and doing all these extracurricular stuff.
Yeah.
um, your family was very musical and you ended up doing that at school too.
Yep,
You want to talk about
that's
that?
right. Yeah, so my mom grew up playing clarinet and having like that very like classical music mindset. My dad was a vocalist and was basically mentored and trained by, for any of you out in listener land who know who the Moses Hogan Chorale is. Uh, my dad trained under Wanda Hogan, who is Moses Hogan's younger sister.
Hmm.
Uh, and uh, so he was, I mean, and I've not seen videos, but like my dad used to sing around the house all the time, and he just this amazing tenor. Uh,
Hmm.
and just has, I don't know if he still sings, but back when he sang when I was a kid, just the most beautiful voice. Like if you've listened to Earth, Wind and Fire, and like the lead singer from Earth, Wind and Fire, like that's the voice he had. Like that was his.
Nice.
It was rich and gorgeous. And so in that regard, my parents were like my first music teachers. My mom and dad from a young age, back before we had to like sell a lot of things to kind of get by, we had this really nice stereo system with like the reel to reels and like the really cool
Oh
equalizers and the
yeah.
giant woofers and what have you.
Yeah.
And my
Yeah. Love
parents,
those things.
yeah, my parents would put on like jazz albums and classical albums, and would put on like the big stereo headphones, put those on me, and would
Hmm.
train me to recognize different instruments.
Nice.
And we would listen to, let's say Mozart's Requiem, and we'd get to like the tuba mirams. My mom would ask me, "Well, what vocal part is that?" I'm like, well, that's the bass, but it could also be a bass baritone, blah blah blah.
Hmm.
And we'd listen to the Messiah or whatever, and during a particular line of music, what instrument is that? Oh, that's the first violin. Or and like they would legit quiz me on that for, I don't know, I don't remember exactly how long they did that, but I remember being like somewhere around maybe 7 or 8, and having that very clear memory of sitting in our living room in a comfy chair with these headphones on, with my parents sitting on either side of me, like, okay, what's that? Okay, what's that? Okay, what's that? It's like,
Hmm.
it's a very visceral memory, and like it's one of my favorite memories, honestly.
Yeah.
So that was kind of always a thing. I've always wanted to. I didn't realize that I could sing myself until I was maybe, or that I had a talent for it. I sang around the house just because it was fun to do, and my dad would sing and my mom would sing,
Hmm.
and it was just fun to sing together with them. Uh, and we were doing a play for school. I want to say it was my fourth grade year, and the person that was singing, I can't remember the name of the song now. It was a church song.
Okay.
They were not able to make it to rehearsal, so the choir director had me fill in for them. I'm like, I don't even know this music. Like, what? Okay, fine. Uh, and I sang it, and I remember the choir director kind of looking at me and going, "Okay, we got to work with you."
Nice.
uh, and like that I remember very clearly in my head that meant that I was going to be the person singing that song instead of the kid they had singing the song, but
That
that was
already
not
had
the
it.
case. That was not the case at all. I was let up. I set
Oh.
myself up for some raw disappointment.
Oh,
Uh,
that's unfortunate.
yeah, but I mean, it started a trend, and so uh, years later, well, not years later, it was maybe fifth or sixth grade. We wound up doing the Wiz, and I got cast as the Scarecrow, and so
For anybody in La La Land out there, The Wiz is a play, right?
yeah, it's a
Right.
musical. It's a musical, yeah. It's a gorgeous and kind of trippy musical, to be quite frank. It's pretty much Barry Gordy's black retelling of The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, that's
Uh,
dope.
yeah, and it's the in the film version of The Wiz, the Scarecrow was played by Michael Jackson, and at the time, I was really, really brilliant Michael Jackson impersonator. Like I was
Mm,
pretty legit at it, and
nice.
so uh, that casting was like I didn't even have to audition for it. Like the choir director was like, "You're going to be this role." I'm like, "Okay, that's cool. I can do that. I already know the music."
That's great.
So that was a lot of fun, and at that point, I had been recognized for a couple of things, both for like my musical talent, my theatrical talent, and my visual arts talent.
Mm,
Unfortunately, my elementary slash middle school did not have a talented and arts music program, so
hmm
I got tested for talented arts visual and talented arts theater,
hmm
and got accepted into both programs, and which is where I met probably the mentor that has had the most impact on my life as a child, Sandra Richards, uh, and she had pretty much taught me about projection, about breath control,
Right. The
about
the traditional vocal
yeah,
education,
oh yeah, and
or I
taught
should say
me
classical.
yeah, yeah. So she was definitely like a classical theater trained, and was also like a stunning vocalist.
Hmm
I don't know if she still sings, but back when I was under her, she was fantastic. And so she taught me as much as she could, and studied with her for like the second half of my sixth grade year and all of my seventh grade year at that school, before I moved on to McMain, where I continued in a program under Marta Bivens. Uh, and there was still no talented in music program at the high school I went to, but there was a talented in arts separate school for that I auditioned for and got into. Decided, but didn't go my freshman year on account of I just started taking Japanese, and it was the only time that they could offer it, and I did not want to take French or Spanish,
Yeah.
and so gave that up in order to finish out the credits I needed to graduate in that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's fair.
yeah,
So this brings up like a number of different conversations,
yeah,
but um, the most recent thing that came up was you get yourself involved into all of these things, and
hmm
now as an adult, you kind of look back at your experience growing up, um, and you're like kind of trying to process the reality that you might have been growing up unknowingly with anxiety and ADHD.
right, yeah. Oh boy, yeah. Um, so yeah, I there were a lot of factors in the way I learned things that we didn't have the language or the understanding for back in the 80s and back in the 90s, that affected that affected my school, my schoolwork,
Mhm.
and there was a lot of like hyperfixation I did not know was a thing,
Right.
that I could attest to any of this. And as a kid growing up, like if my grades were failing on in one subject or another, my parents and even my teachers would sometimes bring up like if it's something that he's very interested in, he goes full in, and it's like he'll memorize everything.
Mm,
But if it's something that he does not have that interest in, it's like he gives up.
mm.
It's like it's not that I give up, it's that my mind cannot stay focused on the thing long enough
Right.
because I want to get back to the thing that actually piques my interest.
hmm
Uh, so yeah, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of, and because of all of that, I mean, I went to a school that was for the gifted and the talented, essentially.
hmm
McMain Magnet School at that point was like a school that you had to take a test to get into.
Right.
And if I was one of the lucky kids that made it to that school, and it was all the way across town, so I had to take like 3 buses to get there.
Mm.
And it was one of those things that my parents never let me forget. It's
Of
like you
course.
you got into this school, you have to make an effort. you have to, if you, unless you want to go to, one of the hood schools, you really need to keep trying, and it's
Hmm.
like, it's not my lack of trying. My lack of trying was never an issue.
Right.
It was my brain was wired in a way I didn't understand, and I didn't know that at the time.
Hmm.
And it affected, like I said, it affected how I learned. It affected how I processed information. It affected even the way I would process things happening around me. Like, part of my ADHD is that I have an auditory processing irregularity, where
Mm.
I can be like, say you and I are talking now, I could be doing my best to focus on the words that are coming out of your mouth. But if there's a noise behind me that my brain decides is going to take precedence, I will hear nothing that you are saying, even though I am
Uh-huh.
absolutely doing my best to focus on you, and all that will enter my brain will be that one noise.
Okay.
And it will last for anywhere between like maybe a few seconds to a couple minutes of me just like, I'm trying to listen. I swear I'm trying to listen. Can you please repeat that? And people would get so frustrated with me.
Well, oh my, I'm learning some things about myself today.
There you go.
That's the point. That's the point of this podcast.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
And it's like only as like an adult, like maybe within like the last like 7 or 8 years, did I realize that that was a thing. And that's when I started to kind of like, maybe this ADHD thing is something that I need to look into for myself.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm personally wondering for myself if like anxiety and ADHD together just kind of make this difficult to diagnose, because
yeah.
when you're a kid and you have ADHD, the idea is that you're a really energetic person that can't sit still in their seat. But like
Hmm.
anxiety makes you worried about a lot of these things, like
Hmm.
disappointing your parents and
Hmm.
getting bad grades. And
Hmm.
so we can use that anxiety to put the pressure on ourselves to like hyperfixate on making sure we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, it was also a lot about like external appearance. So, like, if I am finding myself feeling a certain way, and that was also something that like was emphasized growing up. Like, I had to act a certain way, had to be a certain way in order to be
Hmm.
acceptable. And these like
Right.
weird behaviors that I was exhibiting at the time was not seen as acceptable or something that a young man should be doing.
Mm.
And so it caused me to learn very quickly how to mask all of these things that were later symptomatic of this learning disorder. Uh,
Right.
and so that also brought about it, that came with its own anxieties, right? So
Yeah.
uh, it was definitely an interesting situation to navigate,
Hmm.
especially with a father who was both like sharing your feelings is a good thing, and having emotions and crying is a good thing, but what's not a good thing is expressing the emotions we don't want you to express.
Right. So yeah, that's kind of another thing, is like you had a lot of high expectations that were put on you. I mean, you went to
Oh yeah.
schools for the gifted, and you were existing in this household that was very militantly run,
Hmm.
where you had a lot of issues that ended up coming up with your father. I mean, you described it as like an abuse that was more cultural rather than narcissistic, which is what a lot of I faced when I was growing up.
Hmm.
Was that narcissistic abuse?
Yeah.
But I do find it really interesting that despite that cultural abuse, you described that you gained emotional intelligence through the blackness in your family and the way
Hmm.
that you all interacted with each other.
Yeah. So yeah, it was definitely an odd dichotomy to live with, where I the moment that it was declared that I was a gifted child, uh, like that's when all the expectations came, right? Like he's going to be a scientist, he's going to be an inventor, he's going to be, you know, this, that, and the other, and it's going to be great. He's going to be the first person
Hmm.
in our school or in our family to go to and graduate college. I didn't.
Yeah,
these
yeah, we'll get
these
into that.
Right, we'll get into that. He'll do this thing. He'll be, you know, real millionaire and blah blah blah. Do all these cool things, and that's a lot of pressure to put on a kid at 7 years old.
Yeah,
Like
it is.
that is a ton of pressure. And I mean, it wasn't something that I realized I was feeling until I was maybe in the fifth or sixth grade.
Mm.
And like that was around the time that like the symptoms of ADHD really started to kind of emerge. And in my like, you know, getting yelled at for grades that I couldn't understand myself, like knowing that I'd studied hard for this thing, but that my brain, like looking back at it, like I remember my brain not being able to focus or retain the information that I was cramming for night after night after night after night, and wondering what was wrong with me. And you know, having my parents ask me, you know, why aren't you studying hard enough? Why, you know, I'm like, you're there with me studying, like you're right there, like you see what I'm doing. I don't know what's wrong with me. uh
Hmm.
and you know, threatening like Sylvan, the Sylvan Institute for, you know, failing academics was like a thing back then, where if you were having trouble with school, you'd have to pay these tutors to, you know, come in and sit with you and help you find better ways to study. And
Hmm.
what's weird about the gifted program that we went through, and there's a lot of kids that grew up in the 80s and 90s can attest to this, is that growing up gifted, you were automatically it was automatically assumed that you would retain all of this knowledge, because a lot of us gifted kids were just misdiagnosed to ADHD. And you know, our hyperfixation allowed us to really just like grasp and memorize the content that we were the most interested in. And so when it didn't happen for other subject matter, there was concern, and there was, what's wrong with you? Why, or you're lazy, you are slacking off. It's like, no, that's not what's happening at all. My brain is, I mean, of course I didn't know what my brain was doing at the time. At the time, it was like, I don't know, I'm studying as hard as I can, but my brain can't seem to wrap itself around what I'm trying to get it to learn.
Right.
um, Add to that like a mild case of dyscalculia,
Oh
and
no.
that it made math classes real fun. Let me tell you. Um, and it's also with, you know, aside from the whole parents thing, I had sets of teachers, particularly into high school, that just assumed that we would know things, that we would be able to grasp things easily, especially when it wasn't always the case. One in particular, I won't name names, but she was my algebra 1 and algebra 2 teacher in high
Mm.
school. And the biggest problem that we had with her, or that I had with her, and many of the kids in my class had with her, was that she would give us assignments but not teach us how to do the work. It's like,
Ooh.
all right, here's the thing, get to it. And then when we would figure out how to do it on our own, like, and get the right answers, the answer would be right, but she'd mark it wrong because it wasn't how she wanted us to do it. And like, you didn't show us this. You didn't teach
Yeah.
us how to do the thing. So when you don't teach us how to do the thing, we're gonna figure it out. And her and my biggest beef with each other was that like she wanted me to show all like these, you know, 3 or 4 pages worth of work, and I'm like, but it doesn't take 3 or 4 pages worth of work. Here's what I did, here's how it works, here's the easy solve to this equation, bam, I did it.
Right.
And it would, you know, be like 3 or 4 lines, and that was it. She's like,
Yep.
no, that's not how I want you to learn it. But that's irrelevant and stupid. Like I don't get. So we butted heads a lot, and
Mm.
it was like that for a few of the classes I took in high school, which is why I started to gravitate more towards like literature and music and science. Even I had this
Yeah.
wonderful physics teacher named Dr. Michael Rosinia, may he rest in peace. Who was like one of my biggest champions. Like he I think understood more than any other teacher what was happening to my brain,
Hmm.
and was like, well. I know you can get this. I know you like this, and I know you're interested in this. Let's find another way to help you understand the content and get you through this class.
Hmm.
Going so far as to like call home to talk to me and my parents to make sure that I understood the materials that we talked about earlier on in the day. And I'll never forget the first time he called my house. Like my parents were furious because they thought that there was something wrong, uh, and I don't think they ever quite got the idea that like there was nothing wrong. He was just calling to check in and make sure that I was able to retain the information, and that and if I had any like outside questions regarding the homework assignment or anything like that, that he could answer them for me, and it helped me
Hmm.
understand it in the way that my brain would accept.
Right. No, that kind of teacher is very rare.
Right,
And
right.
especially nowadays, teachers really are expected to do a lot more than they ever were,
Mm-hmm.
and their income really hasn't.
Has not changed at all. Yeah,
Yeah.
he supplemented his income by like he was a doctor because he was a dentist.
Ah.
So that was how he supplemented his income, and I think that's why he was so happy doing what he was doing.
Hmm.
Because he didn't really rely on the teaching to make him money.
Hmm. So, let's see. Uh, I had a train of thought, and
Oh,
it's gone.
I'm
It's
sorry.
gone. um, it was something to do with school and ADHD, ironically.
Brain not
uh,
being able to hold on to things for too long. Yeah, no,
yeah,
I
yeah,
got you.
yeah. Stop. I don't want to learn this about me in the middle of a podcast.
Right, right.
So I understand that the stresses that you were going under, like you need to do a lot of coping, and you've got this weird thing where like your childhood had difficulties with familial relationships,
Mm-hmm.
but the importance of the music that they gave to you was also a big coping mechanism for you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And you wound up doing a lot of musical extracurriculars at school,
Mm-hmm.
and that is eventually what brought you into what you wanted to do for college.
Right.
And regardless of that fact, your your father was not happy with that decision.
Yeah. So I had kind of gone under the tutelage of my choir director, my school choir teacher at that time, who was an amazing woman. It exposed me to a lot of things, both musically and literature wise, that I like was not in the sphere of at all.
Mhm.
And it was during that time where I was like really, really struggling with what I wanted to do with my life, which like, can I just say that at 15, 16 years old, like our brains are not nearly developed enough to be able to be expected to make that decision. It's
Right?
dumb. It's dumb that we are. It's
Right?
really, really
And
stupid that we are.
and honestly, it's a double-edged sword. Like, yes, parenting, being there for your kids, making sure that they have a safe existence is a good thing, but
Hmm.
the less you allow them to go out and experience life for themselves, the less they're going to be able to really understand what it is they want to do with their own life.
I absolutely, I 100% agree. And so was going back and forth between uh, pursuing a an education and career in robotics, and possibly quantum mechanics. That was really when like that whole understanding started to like really get into the mainstream, and people were talking about it. I'm like, that's fascinating. I
Right.
want to learn more about
Right.
that. And also into the arts, being because I'd started kind of writing my own short stories and things, writing music for myself. And was like heavily involved in musical theater and just music within school. And
Hmm.
so it was that weird kind of split between, do I pursue the sciences or do I pursue the arts? And my heart was really on the side of the arts, but my sense of kind of familiar responsibility was pushing on the more science side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, when I finally, kind of crossed that line and was like, no, this is what I want to do. I want to be a singer, be a musician, be a composer. Uh, that definitely ignited some tension within the household. My mom wasn't necessarily thrilled about it, but she understood. Uh, my dad was absolutely not okay. um, there were lots of hard conversations. Not so much conversations as there were lectures. My dad had
Yeah.
this habit of like lecturing you for hours on end, and it was
My
looking back on it
sisters,
now.
my sisters and I talk to each other about the way that our father used to say stuff. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
he would get up on a soapbox and he would start talking at you.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was pretty much the most apt description that you're ever going to get of it.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And he would always say like, "I don't want to repeat myself. I feel like I'm repeating myself," and then he would repeat himself.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Yeah.
and that would go on for like upwards of like 3 or 4 hours. Like I'll never forget. I had an exam. It was my junior or senior year of high school. I had an exam the next day, and like things were going well. At least I thought things were going well. And this was another thing with him. Like you didn't know which dad you were going to get at any given moment.
Right.
Like especially during the time where he was drinking, and
Mm.
thankfully he's been sober for over 20 years now, which is fantastic. But during that time, like and that goes into like part of the anxiety, the whole like being on high alert all the time because you didn't know what person you were going to get that day.
Yeah.
And I think I had gone downstairs to get some water or something, and I don't even know what triggered it. Like I could have breathed funny for all I knew. And
Yeah.
my dad corners me in the kitchen and just like goes off for like a solid like 6 hours. Like it was somewhere around like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning before I finally was able to get away from that and go to sleep. Of which I had to be awake at 5:30 in the morning.
So that you can get your transportation to get to
Yeah,
your exam and everything.
yeah. So it was. I mean, and that it's he would always choose. It would always happen. I don't know if choose is the right word. It would always happen coincidentally, and I'm using air quotes around coincidentally.
Mm.
When my mom used to work at this group home for
Ah.
the it was for mentally disabled people.
Hmm.
So people who had been in accidents and could no longer function on their own.
Right. I
Uh,
used to do the same job myself.
yeah. Uh, she worked there overnights.
Hmm.
And it was usually on nights that she was out working when that kind of thing would happen. And it was brutal because I mean, there's the part of me that wants like to stand up for myself, but also the part of me that's deathly afraid of my father. And
Yeah.
and having been in those physical crosshairs before, it was not something that I wanted to trigger at all.
Hmm.
So the best method I could do, the best thing for me to do was just to stand there and kind of just take it.
Right.
And he would even lay into me about that. It's like I am talking to you, and you're just standing there with that stupid look on your face. And what he didn't understand at the time was that that stupid look on my face was keeping me from reacting to anything that he had to say, because and I didn't know which dad I was getting that day. So any reaction that I could have had could have triggered something wholly different than what happened.
Right.
So that was all that was all self defense from my own perspective.
Right. Instead of, like saying something with a possibility of making it worse.
Exactly. Saying anything or looking a certain way, or and always had to like, no matter how tired I was, make it seem like I was awake and paying attention, lest things would get worse.
Yeah.
So I'll never remember during one of those lectures, he says to me, "If I ever find you playing in a club, I'm gonna pull you out and kick the shit out of you." And it was like,
Wow.
I don't understand what it is I've done to elicit such a response. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Uh, and it wouldn't come till later that I found out, not from him, because he'll never admit to remembering that he did any of that. Uh,
Mm.
but talking to my mom, like not long after I moved out, it's like, yeah, he that was a jealousy thing. Like, and it turns out that he had been offered a scholarship, uh, to go to a local university the from Moses Hogan, the brother of his mentor, and
Mm.
he didn't take it, and wanted to go and decided to go to engineering school because he thought it was more practical. Uh,
Right.
and sorry, that was my dog. I don't know if you heard that.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, and he's always regretted that.
Mm.
And the fact that I had a shot at doing what he could have done drove him crazy.
Right. And there's also that, like, he made the decision that he thought was right based
Yeah.
off of that same thing that you were going through when you were questioning what you were going to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, most people find it very hard to admit that they made the wrong choice.
Right.
But this does bring up that thing that I wanted to talk about.
Ah.
Um, so, yeah, I feel like your experience growing up and learning and fighting against those um, issues that arose in your education from ADHD, um, I feel like those could potentially have been something that like really started to be the thing that affected your self-worth.
Absolutely, it
Because
did.
like you were telling me about how you had these great experiences musically when you were growing up. You had some pretty good affirmations in those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you had this shift where these expectations of you being great were kind of like thrust upon you. You went to a school for gifted children, and all of a sudden now they're seeing the issues that you're having despite these expectations they've got on you.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's now that input that affects self-worth.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
and one of those effects of not having like a really strong sense of self-worth is not standing up for yourself.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah.
So I just it's difficult, we're always really easy to be hard on ourselves, but like you were doing the best you could, like
Yeah.
consistently. Not only were you doing like really well in school, you were putting yourself into after school activities. You even had a job in high school.
I did. Yeah.
And
That was its own thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And there was a lot of stress that came off of that. You said that your parents were kind of utilizing that to get expenses off of rent, right?
Yeah, so my first job was working for the apartment complex we lived in, as a groundskeeper, and I would work it on the weekends, from I want to say it was like 8 in the morning to like 3 in the evening, or 3 in the afternoon, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the grounds had two very capable professional groundskeepers, and yet my parents were able to convince the grounds managers to to hire me, which meant that they got free rent
Right.
because I was a resident of the apartment complex,
Hmm.
which I'm fairly certain allowed them to pay off whatever debts they could and also save money for the house that they would eventually wind up buying.
Hmm.
And it was definitely interesting having that job. Like it was definitely like not the job that I would have picked for myself. I would have much preferred uh actually I don't think I would have preferred working for a fast food place because I would wind up
Oh
working
no.
for one very briefly later on in life and hated it with every fiber of my being.
Oh
Uh
yeah.
but would have probably like because I knew kids that like also worked at our local library, and I probably could have gotten work there, and that would have been great because I would have loved that. Uh, but it wasn't something that I consciously knew was happening when I took that job. When I took that job, it was a this is where you're gonna work. They're gonna pay you, and you're gonna start paying for your own shit as far as school and everything else goes. I'm like, great, cool. I'm gonna do that. I didn't have to even have to interview for it. This is fantastic.
Hmm.
Uh, so did that from junior year up until I graduated high school,
Right.
and that was or the summer before my junior year, I should say, all through the rest of high school and that summer after I graduated, the building managers or complex managers, I should say, moved on to another complex, and I kind of followed them there for the summer,
Hmm.
working for a what was it called? Was it the Palms, the Pines, something like that? That was basically an apartment complex, and assisted living quarters for
Mm.
the elderly. And so I worked there every day during the summer as a groundskeeper up until classes started for university, and then I worked for Pizza Hut for a solid
Nice.
month.
God, my Pizza Hut was run out of town not too long ago. I miss
Oh
that place.
yeah, no, it wasn't even a solid month. It was longer because midterms was about when I quit because this is a stupid story. When I got the job, I let them know that I was a college student and that like above anything else, like my school came before work,
Hmm.
and that I had to leave at X time in order to make it home so that I could like do my schoolwork and study and all that stuff.
Hmm.
So midterms came around, and it was crunch time. So the end of my very last shift, uh, I am, clocking out, and there's like four or five other people like in the back, like the place hadn't closed yet, and like, oh no, y'all, you have to come back here and help us clean up. I'm like, no, this is my time to leave. I gotta go. Like I've got school in the morning. I've got midterms.
Hmm.
uh, and the my boss at the time was like, "No, you have to." I'm like, "We had this conversation. Like, you remember, and you agreed to my school coming before all of this. This is the time in which I am scheduled to not be here anymore today.
Yep.
So I'm gonna go." And it was like, "If you leave, don't come back." It's like, "I'll be back for my check," and I left.
Hmm.
And I still remember like hearing my other coworkers at the time like completely like turn on, like we had gotten friendly and stuff. They completely turned on me. Man, fuck you,
Hmm.
whatever, blah blah blah. You ain't shit, blah blah. Just because you in school and blah 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 blah. I was like, damn, okay.
Hmm. Oh yeah. Now there's a lot of toxicity in the restaurant biz.
Yeah, I was not prepared for that at all.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, more power to you for doing that while you were going to school too.
yeah, it was like the check was nice, and it was nice having like something to like I had to come home and I could go to work, and it was a good bit of structure for like outside of school, outside of home that like I appreciated.
Hmm.
But also, yeah, it was like looking back on it in that environment and those people, they were the worst.
Absolutely.
It
Oh man.
was, whew.
I'm I'm glad that my time in the restaurant business has either been very short because I was not sticking around all that toxicity forever, or B,
Yeah,
a delivery driver where I was just like not around it most of the time.
yeah, that's fair. That is very fair. I couldn't drive at the time, so I just the delivery driver was not an option.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was weirdness. But yeah, the whole work thing with my parents, like I truly believe that that's what happened. Like they were able to use that to help them not have to pay rent and save up for the house that they eventually bought my freshman year of high school, freshman year of college rather.
Mm-hmm.
And that was its own experience.
Mm-hmm.
uh, I remember being fairly like knowing that I wouldn't be there long, but also thinking that I would have like more say in like the whole like house hunting experience.
Mm-hmm.
And like, hey, this is the house we're gonna buy. It's like, oh, I didn't even know you guys were looking. Like, this is the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, that sucks.
like you usually
That really
bring me
sucks.
like they used to bring me on, like when we did move in the past, they'd bring me on things, and I would, of course, as a kid, you kind of like, I gotta go look at another stupid house. But I was like actually kind of like disappointed. It's like I would have thought that I would have some role in that. And they're like, you're not gonna be here long anyway. Why do you care? It's like,
Yeah.
you know what? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I'm not gonna be here very long. Good.
Yeah.
All right. Good.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, but that was, yeah, it was interesting. And then on top of that, like uh I don't know that everyone does this, but it became, or even if it is a cultural thing, uh but it was, you get a job while you're living here, uh or while I lived there, like I got to give my parents like a third of my check every paycheck, uh,
Mhm.
to cover, food and what have you. I'm like, I'm willing to buy my own food. No, you got to give us a third of your check. Oh, all right, fine. Uh, and the way I wound up getting around that, which was hilarious to me, before I moved out of that place, I started working at a hotel as a bellhop, and it was a very, very pricey hotel that tipped really, really fucking well. So
Nice.
I was more than happy to give them a third of my check because I didn't have to give them my tips, and I'd made in tips like 3 times what I made per check.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
it's like, all right, cool. Shove all this other money to the side, like in a sock or something,
Hmm.
until I got a bank account, and that's where I wound up putting my money, because shoving it in a sock in my drawer in a house where there's little to no privacy, it was not always a great plan.
Yeah. Um, we'll get back to that. But you had a pretty rough experience towards the end of your college experience.
Yeah,
You eventually changed your major, right?
yeah. So,
And that kind of like screwed with timelines and stuff, and then
mhm.
had some issues with the scholarship that allowed you to go there.
Yeah, so there are quite a few factors in that. So first year, uh, end of my first year of school, I moved out and uh, was just kind of uh, there. There's a lot of shit that led up to that point, but we'll get to that. School wise, like I moved out, and it was tail end of my freshman year, and I was burnt out, just completely burnt out.
Hmm.
And at that point, like, I didn't know that taking a semester off was like a thing you could do. And so when I became aware of that, I was like, yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a semester off, kind of reset my brain, and just, you know, do that. So did that, came back the following spring semester. And I went to school as a classical voice major at Xavier University,
Hmm.
and uh, part of the deal for keeping the scholarship that I had was that I had to be a part of, I want to say it was either two or three ensemble groups. So I was in the concert choir. Yeah, it was two ensemble groups. I was in the concert choir and I was in the university choir.
Hmm.
And I would eventually later on like join the classical orchestra and the jazz orchestra as well.
Hmm.
But I say halfway through our no, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. It wasn't after my freshman year that I took the semester off. It was after my sophomore year, because my
Hmm.
sophomore year we went to Italy. We went to Italy because the nun that founded our school got canonized, and the entire music department got invited up to Italy to perform in the Vatican City for the actual ceremony.
Yeah, that's got to be a dope memory.
Oh, it's one of my favorites. It was. I'll never forget like singing in Vatican Square with like it's raining and we're kind of in these like rafters singing out into the kind of the way the Vatican Square is actually more of like a circle, and the
Hmm.
circle is kind of an amphitheater. So we're singing into the
Oh.
amphitheater, and the Pope is there in his Pope mobile, and there's a crowd on the other side that like when it started, the moment it started raining, there's this sea of umbrellas that went up, and I remember taking so many pictures of that sea of umbrellas within. I didn't even care that the Pope was there. Like, this is a crazy moment that I need to document. So I
Yeah, who
have these
cares
had
about the
these
Pope and his fancy hat? We got umbrellas here.
right. There's a sea of umbrellas in the middle of the Vatican, uh, and like that was a crazy experience. And during that trip, I bought my first guitar. I've been wanting a guitar for as long as I could remember. My parents could never afford one,
Hmm.
so found one like maybe 2 blocks down the street from the hotel we were staying at for like $50. This beautiful classical guitar, uh, and brought it home, which did not do anything to make relations better. Because I'm still living at home, to make relations
Mm.
better with my dad, having me walk into the house after this like almost month long trip
Right.
with a guitar in my hand. Um, Hang on, I'm gonna mute real quick because
Right. That's fine.
okay, and I had forgotten that I had turned off my phone so that that alert would not happen. So at that point, it's like I've got to learn to play guitar, and I just kind of started teaching myself some basic chords and rhythms and things, and that was cool. And wound up taking guitar lessons through a guy that would come to the university like once a week.
Mm.
So I found out through him that like if I really wanted to like get like really good technique and things under my belt, that the best way to do that would be to take classical guitar. Unfortunately, classical guitar was not a thing that was offered unless you majored in it.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, so I switched my major from classical voice to classical guitar for a year so that
Hmm.
I could learn classical guitar, which my director was not pleased with, being that he was my initial voice teacher,
Hmm.
uh, and was like, "Well, just, you still have to uh, participate in things if you want to keep your scholarship. And I'm like, no, that's fine. I can do that. So did that for a year, only to learn that I had started studying classical guitar way too late in my life because my fingers were wrong.
Oh no.
Uh, and I'll never forget that my teacher said the only way to fix that would be to break and reshape your fingers. Like, well, shit, could you not have told me that at the beginning? I would not have gone through the whole rigmarole of swapping majors only for you to tell me, yeah, it's kind of too late for you.
That's terrible.
Yeah. So,
It's just a little oversight.
yeah, right, right. Though he did teach me a lot about flamenco and a lot about bossa nova, which stuff I hold on to. It has ingrained itself into how I play guitar now.
Nice.
So that at least stuck. And also the finger exercises that he would have me do every day for like 2 hours a day.
Yeah.
Because they hurt a lot. But yeah, did all that, and during went back to being didn't go back to being a voice major. Went actually from guitar major to being a composition and creative writing major with a minor in, I think my minor, because of my scholarship, I had to take a minor in a foreign language, so I took a minor in German.
Mm.
And that was going through some really, really, really stressful stuff at the time. I had been robbed at gunpoint earlier on in that year. My dad had an accident. And this was after I'd moved out, mind you. My dad had an accident where he basically had broken his back and was going through his own like mental health spiral. Mm-hmm. I was in a relationship that ended it terribly and like absolutely like shattered me. And I had also suffered a minor heart attack. So
God damn.
Yeah, that was my spring semester of what was that? 2003. Spring semester 2003. The heart attack happened like 4 days before my 22nd birthday, if you can believe
Jesus.
it. So I was all kinds of screwed up. So it that had me miss a few classes. I was still taking voice lessons, even though I didn't really need to at that point in time. Mm-hmm. And my voice teacher, or at least one of my voice teachers, I was taking it from two different teachers at the time because I was on the verge of deciding, okay, should I stay with the original voice teacher or should I go with this other person? And because I'd missed some of those classes, according to him, he had forgotten conveniently to submit my my paperwork for my scholarship for that semester. Which meant that when finals came around, I got a lovely letter in my inbox, in my mailbox at the apartment complex I lived in, saying that if I didn't pay the X number of $1,000 before X date, I could not take my finals. And which this was
asinine.
Yeah. And this was my junior year. It's the end of my junior year. And I like went to school. I was like, "What school? Why didn't you?" And he's, "Well, you didn't come to class, and so blah 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 blah." I'm like, "I had stuff. I almost died. like family stuff and other personal stuff. Like, dude, like, why? Like, and why is that an excuse? This was something you were supposed to do anyway." Mm-hmm. And so I was forced, unfortunately, to drop out. I couldn't pay that money at the time. I didn't have scratch for that. I was, working 2 jobs, trying to make ends meet while going to school full time.
Yeah.
And at that point, like my brain just went, yeah, no, this is a better idea to just not do that. So,
do you think that you would have had a different experience working outside of school if you had the ability to stay home?
I'd like to think so. Um, it's something that I've thought about to the point of like making myself upset about it. So
Oh,
I have not put much thought into that in a while, but uh, yeah, I feel like that experience could have been a lot better if I was allowed to stay home and just kind of deal with stuff.
yeah.
But
So,
again, like mental health was not really a thing that was talked about or
right.
discussed or in the mainstream at that time. You talk to someone and you say, I'm having issues, I'm depressed or I've got anxiety or whatever, and people thought you were crazy. Uh,
Yeah. It was taboo up until like 5 or 6 years ago, really.
yeah, yeah, very much so.
And
Uh,
COVID
Particularly
experiences changed that dramatically.
Absolutely, it did. I mean, particularly in the black community, because in the black community, we have this stigma of live and let God give it to God, let God handle it,
Hmm.
pray on it, And at that point, I was on the outs with religion,
Hmm.
so that was not an option for me,
Right.
uh, and like all the meditation in the world because I was heavy into meditation at the time. All the meditation in the world could not help what I was dealing with.
Hmm.
Especially when, thanks to the depression, I had no real motivation to meditate. All I really wanted to do was stay in bed and cry.
Yeah.
And the pressure of like, all right, I've got school, I've got this, I've got that, I've got work, I've got bills to pay, and a degree to try and reach for overrode my sense of self-preservation and
Hmm.
uh, I did what I could, but sometimes you can make all the right choices, as Captain Picard said, and still lose, and
Right.
that's not a failing. That's just life.
Hmm. So you were saying that, kind of this whole process is like a depressing thought for you. I know that it's connected to a really upsetting memory. Would you like to share that?
Oh boy, yeah. So before I moved out, uh, maybe about a week or two actually before I finally like had moved out of the house. Uh, I'd already had a job and had interviewed for a second job that I was trying to leave that job for. And my mom was best friends with someone whose sister managed a temp agency, essentially.
Mhm.
And my mom had set up an appointment for me to go and talk to uh, this woman. And it was on a Saturday morning, or the appointment was for a Saturday afternoon, but it was a Saturday morning when this all happened. As I'm, up and getting ready to go to this thing, and this is at the new house, of course. And my dad made it a habit to mow the lawns on Saturday mornings.
Mhm.
And it was my responsibility to help him mow the lawns, even though he would never let me touch the lawnmower or the weed whacker. I was always there just kind of sweeping up after him, right?
Mhm.
And so that morning I was under the impression that my mother had told him about this prior engagement that I had to
Right.
go to that was clear across town in like the downtown New Orleans. And again, we live out in the east, which is like the outskirts of the city.
Mhm.
It might as well be kind of another town in and unto itself, kind of plopped onto the edge of New Orleans proper.
Sorry.
Right.
Um, and so I'm getting ready for that, and my dad storms into my room. What the hell are you doing? I'm out here mowing the lawn, and you're not out here. And I'm like, I have this thing I have to go to this morning. So get your ass out here, and you're gonna help me with this thing. It's like, okay, fine. We can get this done quickly so that I can go. And we get out there, and he just starts laying into me, just it's another lecture
Mm-hmm.
of how pretty much like all the things that I could have done and all the things I could have been and how I'm a failure at this and how I am not uh, living up to what he knows I can be and this, that, and the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I will never know what triggered this, but like again, like all I could do was stand there and listen and take what he was saying, uh, because if I didn't, something worse would happen.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks at me and he says, "You just get out of my face, because right now you're not shit to me." And I that those are words that, in my opinion, that's something you should never, ever, 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 if you care for the mental health of your child, ever utter to them. Not even in just ever.
Mm-hmm.
And he said those words to me, and I remember very clearly going inside, kind of toweling myself off, making myself fresh, grabbing, my stuff, and what should have been a bus ride wound up being a walk.
Mm.
As I walked from my house, or my parents' house, up a bridge, across said bridge, into downtown, and
Right.
to this interview thing for, uh, and they tried to like give me construction work. I'm like, I don't want construction work. I don't even know why I'm here. I have a job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm about to get a second job. Like, I don't know why I'm here. Uh, and I walked back home because I had to get to my job.
Right.
And like I worked literally like around the corner from my parents' house. So it wasn't like they didn't know I had a job
Mm-hmm.
at the time. Uh, so I came home, like the rage and the fury and just the absolute hurt of that still echoing in my head. Just
Mm-hmm.
like his words ping ponging through my mind louder than louder than anything I could have imagined at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And like it cut deep in such a way that now whenever I fail at something, or whenever I don't do as well as I feel like I could have at something, those are the words that echo in my head still.
Mm. That's really
And
unfortunate.
it it is something that I am learning more and more to quiet as best as I can,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but it does not make it go away altogether.
Yeah.
And uh,
I find what helps for me is recognizing that all that is an intrusive thought.
yeah,
Being able to name that helps me recognize it when I'm starting to think those things.
mhm.
Um, so there's a certain feeling to those thoughts,
Yeah, there
and
absolutely
it
is.
like once you recognize that, once you feel that, you can be like, whoa, this is an intrusive thought. This is something that's not healthy for me. This is gonna
Mhm.
like put me in a place that's not good. And there's no reason that I need to be leaning into that. So like learning how to put the brakes on, like that's still like a next step.
Yeah,
um it takes a lot of practice.
yeah, absolutely, it does. I am still in the practice phase of that
Same.
for sure.
Very much the same.
But
um
it's one of those things that has definitely, and as I spoke upon earlier, like I could confront him about it 20 some odd years later. Is there any guarantee that he'll remember it at all? Absolutely no guarantee. One of the things that I've noticed a lot within Black culture, particularly when it comes to revisiting the trauma that your parents have inflicted upon you is that they will tend to not remember anything. Like I've tried this with like smaller things, with much smaller things. Oh, I don't remember that, or I don't think that happened that way. And it's like, no, it did. It really did.
Mm.
Uh, and so knowing that, like any attempt, I think, at trying to bring that up will just result in disappointment and an argument that I just don't want to have.
Hmm.
And that brings me to this kind of realization that like even if they did remember, even if they even if my dad remembered what he'd said to me, even if he apologized, even if he like sat there and like was really really sorry and cried and all of that stuff, like I don't know that that would help. Like if anything, it would feel it would feel wrong because it'd feel like I was taking vengeance upon him and using the hurt that he inflicted on me to hurt him, which is not something I want to do. Like the whole thing has always been like I want you to be better than I ever was, and I want you to be better than me, and I want you to learn from my mistakes. And like I really really do think like looking at this now that like that's a mistake that I would have made. Like I would have not I don't think I would have just done it, but I think I would have reveled in it, and that's not the type of person I want to be.
Right. I
Like I
understand that.
and it's easier for me to or not easier because it's not easy at all, but it is better for me not even so much to let it go so much as to understand that this was the thing he did, understand that it hurt, and work through that on my own
Right.
to forgive myself for believing those words,
Mm.
and to make it so that I am a better parent to my daughter than he was to me,
Right.
and that is the I hate to say that it's a lesson, but it kind of is a lesson. That is now the goal, and what I take from that experience is that he did what he could with what he had available to him. Does it make
Hmm.
anything he did or said right? Absolutely not. But it does teach me about what I don't want to be, and
Right.
that is the thing that I will forever uh, strive for is to be better as a parent, as a
Hmm.
person than he was to me.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that you never fail and you never lose if you're able to learn something from whatever experience that you go through.
Yeah.
And that experience, like I've had a lot of experiences like that of my own, not just with my father, but plenty of other people
Hmm.
where I'll bring my heart to them over experiences that I've had with them that really disappointed me.
Hmm.
And it's cultivated in my learning that it's important to find a closure within yourself,
Yes.
because
Absolutely.
you can't always assume that whenever you're ready to find closure that you can get a hold of somebody and they're even going to want to meet you.
Right.
And if that does happen, you can't expect that conversation to go over well and for you to get that closure that you desire. In
Hmm.
fact, some things you can say, it's about a 50-50 chance whether or not you're going to get that or whether it's going to be worse.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, it's really important for us to turn inward and to really find that closure for ourselves. Like,
Yeah.
what what was it that that action or those words hurt in us?
Hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's I mean, that in and of itself was like a 20-year process, because that
Yeah,
that
yeah.
seeped
Don't say that.
into.
Don't say that. I don't want to go for another 15 like this.
Oh goodness, I hope you don't have to. I mean, it was
Ugh.
it took me that long to kind of realize it, though. Like it's I mean, and half of that was like not even realizing for a long time that those words were even still there. Like I would
Mm,
hear the words and not like there would be like a cognitive dissonance where it was like it would not connect or not compute where that was coming from, and then having it was when Picket Fences released the Denzel Washington film Picket
mm,
Fences, and I've never seen it. I don't think I ever will, because the uh, in the trailer there is a scene where the young boy, the son, asks his father, played by Denzel Washington,
mhm,
"How come you never liked me?"
mm.
And watching Denzel's character's response, "What the fuck you mean like you? I don't have to like you." Like that triggered so many memories,
Oh shit.
and and that particular memory, especially, where it's like I can't watch this anymore. Like I can't just nope, nope,
Mm,
nope. And I think that's when I really started to like to begin processing what had happened to me, and how that affected me, and how that kind of seeped into just about every aspect of my life. Like, and had even I am thankful that I was able to catch it before it got any worse, but it had begun to like seep into my relationship with my daughter. And
mm.
the I absolutely thankful that I was able to put the brakes on that and completely change that relationship. Not that it was ever like a strange relationship, but I could see where I was beginning to repeat things that my dad had done.
Mm. How
And
so?
where I was, rather than I was getting to points with her where I would, rather than like sit down with her and like talk about like how we're feeling about a thing. Uh, so as an example, we are, my wife and I are very much into, of course, the emotional intelligence and making sure that she knows, that our daughter knows that she's cared for and that her emotions are not wrong.
Hmm.
But occasionally I would catch myself in like, I'd see her get irritated with something that we said, and I would. It was very much a much tamer version of lecturing than my dad did, but it was
Mm.
still lecturing rather
Right.
than getting to the root of why she feels that way. And I had caught myself a couple times going, "Oh wait, no, 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 no. That's not where we're at. That's not where we're at. That's not what we're doing."
Hmm.
And like having to like apologize, like actively learning how to apologize to my child for wronging her, or for uh not considering her feelings, or which is not something that you see in most parents, like especially
Right.
like growing up in our generation. Like our parents never apologized to us for anything. Like,
Absolutely not.
it was you do what I say because I said so. And then that's another thing that like we have very much anti the "because I said so" thing. It's like if she asks why, we're gonna tell her, we're gonna give her like a solid, legit reason as for why. And sometimes that solid, legit reason will be, "Oh, but we are having you do this because we don't want to do this right now," and you're right there.
Hmm.
Or we think it'll help you learn about responsibility, or whatever the actual reason happens to be. And she'll get upset, and we'll talk about her feelings, and rather than giving her this like lecture about what she should do and what's expected of her and this, that, and the other, like it is like a partnership. And I'll it's something that I did not realize was a thing until when a dear friend of mine became a parent and asked for advice. I was like, the best advice that I could give him were advice that I wish someone had given me and that someone had given my parents, is that you are learning to be a parent at the same rate that that child is learning to be a person. Give
Right.
your, both of yourselves as much grace as you can in that process, because you both will be great at it. You will both fail horribly at it. But
Yeah,
give yourself grace and patience.
that's a very beautiful thing.
And it's every time I find myself getting frustrated with her, with my child, my daughter,
Hmm.
I have to remember that. It's like we're both learning to be what we are,
Right.
and it is a process, and it is a changing process because she's growing and evolving, which means I also have to grow and evolve with her,
Hmm.
and adapt. We're adapting to each other constantly.
Hmm. Do you feel like kind of the pressure of high expectations, the um, always working really hard at things, do you feel like that kind of hinders that process? Because like it's it's difficult to face something like a frustration and then like not want to get to the bottom of it and fix it and solve it rather than just kind of like take a breather, let it relax on yourself, relax on the person involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely think so. I've seen it happen to other people. Like it is, and like wanting to help them and wanting to like kind of like, hey, you don't have to like that's not a path you have to take. You can just take a breath. Like, no, I can't because the thing has to get done and I always have to be doing something. It's like, no, 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 just take a moment and breathe. Just breathe.
Hmm.
uh and I mean I think a lot of that falls into, you know, more people having anxiety than I think are aware of it.
I
Uh,
think so too.
and I think it's because of, you know, the our generation specifically, just all of the pressures that were put on us by our parents, by our surroundings, by the schools we went to, of
Hmm.
us to pretty much be the generation that saves the world or whatever it is. And I mean, we tried. uh, there's no lacking of trying there.
Hmm.
It just we weren't told, and I don't think they were told either, that it's going to take more than just us doing that. And when, you know, it's that whole like, we're pinning all our hopes on you, kiddo. It's like, no, don't do that, please don't do that. Just don't. That's a
Hmm.
bad move.
Yeah.
It's you shouldn't ever do that. Um, but yeah, it's I definitely think that it more than contributes. It definitely feeds that that sense of not being able to just sit with your feelings and sit with whatever it is that's happening to you that's frustrating, that you're not
Hmm.
able to get, and just let it roll off. And if you feel like you can come back to it and tackle it from a different angle, great. If you need to take more time away from it, also great. And that's something that I've
Hmm.
had to learn for sure. Like as a creative, like I can't tell you how many projects I have going that I have had to walk away from because I reached a place where I just could not anymore, and it was frustrating as all hell.
Hmm.
And like my wife, who's like one of my biggest advocates, is like, you are in a place right now where you need to focus on something else because this is not serving you right now, and you are fresh. You're gonna kill yourself this way. Like, just leave it. Go do something else. Go work on something else. Go play PlayStation for a little bit. Like, take some time away from it. And
Yeah.
like that
Um,
she's been amazing in that way, and she's helped me through a lot of that stuff.
so yeah, this that conversation brings up uh something that I find very interesting about you and your story and like just kind of a realization you've had in your life that I find very
Hmm.
compelling is after all of that experience in childhood and through college, um, you made plans to move out to Washington,
Hmm.
which went a little awry because of Katrina.
Right.
Um, but you get out there and you're just starting to meet like a whole lot of different people that
Yeah.
became a great foundation for you, your wife included.
Hmm.
Um, Go ahead and share that experience. It's very
Yeah.
interesting.
So, like you said, yeah, my plan was to move out here to Washington. Uh, the plan was to move out here in like 2006. To save up enough money, I like moved out of the apartment I was living in by myself and was living with a friend that I was working with at the time, and to sole purpose was to save up and get the hell out of Dodge. I'd heard about the Seattle music scene and figured, since the New Orleans music scene had pretty much failed me at that point, I was gonna try my luck out here.
Mhm.
And not even like 2 weeks, this was just a little over 2 weeks actually, after I moved into this place, Katrina hit, which definitely messed with my plans quite a bit. I wound up evacuating like 2 days before the storm hit.
Mhm.
Evacuated with like a bunch of coworkers to Hiawassee, Georgia, which is just on like the at most northeastern edge. Like there's a spot in Hiawassee that also converges with North and South Carolina.
Ah.
So you can be in three cities or three states at once, and it's ridiculous.
Mhm.
Uh, so was there for a week. Wound up going. I was working for Starbucks at the time, and Starbucks put me in a hotel in Atlanta for a week while we figured out what to do with me. Uh, and at that point, like the plan was to move to. I was still trying to get to Washington, uh, and the initial plan was that all the people, well, not all the people, but like a bunch of the people that I'd evacuated with were also going, like, we're all going to drive up together, right?
Mhm.
And they decided not to do that uh, yet, and decided that they were going to first try to go back into town, back into New Orleans, and see about their stuff. Because when we all lived within like walking distance from each other, and we weren't in like any of the major flood areas, but we were at the epicenter of all the looting,
Right.
and that was a whole thing. And I had no reason to go back because I had received the call that all of my stuff had been stolen because I had never unpacked,
Mhm.
uh, and so all my stuff was gone, including the guitar that I got from Italy, which made me so sad.
Oh.
But I had my electric guitar, like my Xbox, some books, and like a few changes of clothes.
Mhm.
And so the Seattle district office set me up to travel to Washington, and I wound up staying with uh, the HR officer that kind of put all that together. Stayed with her for the first weekend, and then we went to Tacoma because Tacoma, believe it or not, Seattle is expensive to live.
Yeah,
uh,
no. I
it
don't know
is
anybody that would think that.
it is ridiculous. And Tacoma, which is about 45 minutes to the south, is still kind of a rather like decently sized city, and the cost of living there is comparable to what I had known in New Orleans at the time.
Mhm.
So they put me up there with a family, wonderful family, the Backmans, and I stayed with them for a month, and got close to them and their son. And their son, who also worked for Starbucks,
Mhm.
introduced me to like a bunch of people through both work and through just kind of his college friends. Uh, and then I moved out a month after that, and within about a week or two, I met my wife for the first time. She came into the Starbucks that I worked at, and was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen on two legs,
Mhm.
and still is. Uh, and we It was about a month before I rustled up the nerve to ask her out.
Mhm.
And I did, and we've been together ever since. And was introduced to through her all of her friends who wound up becoming uh, pretty much family. We call them our village, uh,
Nice.
and it's that whole. And I love that I know this, and that this phrase has been turned on its head for me. That whole phrase, blood is thicker than water," which is a misquote. The actual quote is, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb," which
Mhm.
is the exact opposite of what people have misconstrued it to be. uh,
Exactly.
and I've taken that to heart. Like, a found family truly is the best family.
Mhm.
I have grown and thrived so much because of them. I've had so much support through them and with them, and have been able to be like myself, like unabashedly, which has been liberating in ways I cannot even begin to tell you. So I'm absolutely grateful to them. They are all the godparents of my daughter.
Nice.
And it is a wonderful group of people that I have found thanks to my wife, and uh, that has continued into the community that I found via TikTok in the D&D community, uh,
Right.
and that is has been just amazing, like another kind of like second family that
Right.
I can lean on and rely on,
Hmm.
which is wonderful.
Yeah.
Um,
And you were saying that you had a lot of opportunities for growth ever since you went to Washington.
mhm.
Like growing that family, that's one thing. Um, I know that you've had some interesting problems in your job growth as far as like COVID is concerned.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but TikTok as well, you know?
yeah. That has been a really interesting, particularly with COVID. So before COVID, before this job, I worked for uh, a construction company, an HVAC construction company that will remain nameless for now. Uh, but I mean, it was good, and it paid great money. Uh, but it was always for me a means to an end, and the end was money, so that I
Right.
could, be able to provide for my family, and uh, and be able to work on the things that actually mattered to me, which was my music and my writing.
Hmm.
And so when things began to happen with the band I was in, uh, of course, I got excited about it because it was something that I've been working for all intents and purposes, my entire life.
Hmm.
And the complaint came from the head of IT, where it was like, "Hey, we get that you love, what you're doing," and this is this person who, like, not even like a day or so beforehand, had been like, "Man, I'm really proud of what you're doing with your music. It's really great. Blah blah blah. Blah. It's amazing."
Hmm.
To turn around and say, "Hey, maybe you should have the same uh, enthusiasm and love for your job as you do for your music." And
Eek.
I'm like, you do understand that I didn't go to school for any. Cause I've worked in the tech industry for almost 15 years now. I didn't go to
Hmm.
school for any of this. This was
Right.
not my intended purpose. I kind of fell into it, and it made good money, so I stuck with it.
Hmm.
Uh, it's like this was not my dream. Like, I understand if it is your dream,
Hmm.
and that is, like, no hate on that, no hate or no shade on that at all. But this album that we're putting out, or that we had now, 5 years ago, already put out, uh, has been a dream of mine since I was a child.
Hmm.
And no amount of being told to calm down about my excitement about this thing that I've dreamed of since childhood is going to make me calm down about it. Like,
Yeah,
I'm sorry if that makes people uncomfortable, but this is my life and my job is a means to an end for me. It's not my dream. And how dare you chastise me for being happy about the thing that I am pursuing that makes me happy?
absolutely.
Like not hurting anyone. It's not affecting my job. Like
You
there's
know,
nothing wrong.
I hope you don't mind, but you can step up on your soapbox and do a lecture on that. I'd appreciate that.
Man, if it's and that's something that stuck in my head. Like even after I left, I definitely I left that place, and I am well shot of them, and I am working for a company now where the culture is such a 180, and it is
Mhm.
beautiful, and it was a minor pay cut at first, but I've more than made up for that in recent years. But
Yeah.
like it was like having people that are being in an environment where you can rely on the people that you call your colleagues to be excited for the things that you're doing,
Hmm.
even if they do not at all have anything to do with the job at hand, with what the company does, is amazing. Or you can also be that for other people. Like
Hmm.
I do not understand why that is difficult, why that is such a an insult to people who love their jobs. Like I like
Yeah.
what I do. I'm good at what I do. I'm passionate about doing what I do well. Is it my dream job? It absolutely is not.
Mm.
Is it the thing that I have dreamed about since I was 6 years old and I saw Michael Jackson's Thriller for the first time? It is not. But it is a thing that I do and I do well and I take pride in that. But
Hmm.
that will never ever in a million years compare to being able to do the thing that I love.
Right.
And I think the more that employers can get behind the whole, and it's the whole like work life balance thing. Like
Hmm.
it is a matter of like there is a life that I live outside of this place that matters to me. And if it does
Right.
not matter to you, that's fine. But I'm not gonna be less excited about my life outside of this workplace
Hmm.
to make you feel more comfortable about your choices.
Yeah.
So it was definitely like leaving that job and taking that pay cut and moving to this one has been a step up. And I now have because of COVID, I've started my own department within my own sub department, which is quickly becoming its own department.
Right. You were
Uh,
telling me that it's because people got a lot of pets during COVID, and that's like
mhm.
you do stuff with veterinary insurance, so
Yeah,
like a lot of people were wanting to insure everything, and
yeah,
just business boomed during COVID.
yeah. Business pretty much exploded during COVID because yeah, people are were uh, self isolating and were going crazy, needed company, and then pets were the easiest thing to do. Uh, and as a result, yeah, they all wound up getting well, maybe not all of them, but a good deal of them wound up getting pet insurance, which meant that we needed more butts and seats to be hired.
Hmm.
And I was already kind of ordering things for people and taking care of like financial stuff. And for all intents and purposes, I said, "Hey, I'm already doing this. If you give me a legit title and pay me more, like I can just take this completely over for you guys, and no one else has to worry about it but me."
Right.
And everyone involved or everyone who mattered was like, "Yeah, that seems legit. Cool. Here's the money. Here's your title. Have that."
Dope.
And I've been doing that now for like the last like year and a half, and that's been it's been nice because I was in more of the kind of customer service arm of tech support before
Mm.
that, and while it was, it was fine, it wasn't a terrible job. Also, I dealt with people who maybe should not have access to technology, and that could be frustrating and could,
Ooh.
and it occasionally weighs a toll.
Hmm.
So sweetest people, like good people, like I will truly say that like I have not met uh, a soul who works for this company that has not been like at least a mostly decent person.
Jeez,
uh,
that's nice.
yeah, it's and I've been there. It'll be what, 4 years in September.
Mm.
Uh, and no, not September. It'll be 4 years next month, actually. Uh,
Mm.
so it's really nice to be in a place where I can feel unrestrained
Yeah,
about the
that's a
things that I
great
love.
description. That is a great description of that. So yeah, you've come out of all of this with honestly got a lot to look forward to. Like your D and
Yeah,
D, um, your D&D podcast has gone to a live stream.
yeah,
You're gonna be doing a D&D thing at Gen Con.
yeah. I'm still kind of freaking out about that. Yeah. So yeah, the D&D stream that I'm in with the streaming group ADH Adventures, uh, is they've got two shows happening at Gen Con, two live shows. The first live show is going to be on the main stage on the first day of the con, and then on the Saturday of the con is our show, the show that I'm involved in, which I'm thrilled about because it's a new-ish show, and I say
Mhm.
new-ish because it was on for a while, and then there were some complications with the DM at the time, and they
Mhm.
had to stop the show. And we just started the show up again, like maybe 2 or 3 months ago,
Nice.
with a returning as many of the cast as could returned, and then myself and another cast member are new to this particular campaign,
Mhm.
and so it was absolutely just kind of like, oh wow, they want us at Gen Con, really? Oh, okay. I guess I should buy some tickets then. That's a thing that's happening, and it's like the more and more I think about it now, the more and more excited I get. It's like, oh my god, it's gonna be such an opportunity. I'm gonna get to meet so many people. So I'm going there with them, and also the other group that I stream with, Dinner and a Game.
Mhm.
We're going to be doing a lot of like interviews with people. We're going to get to meet Satine Phoenix.
Oh
Uh,
my god.
yeah, I'm so stoked for that.
I am so stoked for you. Holy shit.
Yeah, we're
Yes.
gonna get to meet Satine Phoenix. We've got an interview with Katiosaurus lined up.
God damn.
Yeah, I'm legit pumped about it. Like it's gonna be real nice, and I'm really really glad to be affiliated with both of these groups. Like it's amazing.
Yeah, that
Uh,
is phenomenal. If you're ever looking for a dope ass player who's looking to get into the voiceover industry, you let me know.
yeah, hell yeah, man. That is I have been considering running a second game. So if I do decide to take that plunge, I will come and get you.
Nice. It's great to know. I'll be
Hell
looking
yeah.
out for it if that is something you want to do.
Yeah, I am involved in so many games right now that if I took another one on currently, my wife might kill me. Because
Yeah,
I am, let's see,
that's
one,
fair.
two, three,
That's fair.
four, four. I'm involved in 6 separate games that stream, and that's not counting the game that I'm involved in that doesn't stream. So it's 7 games
Mm,
altogether.
nice.
So yeah, if I
What a
take on
life.
anything else, it's gonna be I'm gonna have hell to pay.
Yeah.
So it would have to I would have to give up one of the games in order to do that. It was something that I
Hmm.
am considering probably giving up the one that I don't stream with. But
Mm.
that if I do that, it won't happen for a while because I'm in the
Yeah.
middle. I just started running a campaign for those guys, so
Hmm.
uh, it, it, it's it'll be at least a year before I make that decision.
That's fair. So we'll get ahead. We'll wrap this up.
Okay.
Is there any kind of life lesson that you would like to share with anybody in the world?
Oh man.
And you
Um
mentioned one, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the blood of the womb. You mentioned
yeah.
that one.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good one. Because there's a lot of families and there's a lot of communities that tout the whole family first mentality,
Mm-hmm.
or family before anything else mentality.
Right.
And that works when your family, when there's no one in your family that's incredibly toxic or incredibly
Exactly.
harmful or narcissistic or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
In the cases for people who do have to deal with that, there is nothing wrong with looking outside of your blood relations for family. And
Mm-hmm.
that can come as significant other, that can be best friends, that can be a community of like-minded nerds who like to roll dice together. Like it can come in so many beautiful, wonderful forms. So uh,
Absolutely.
being as open to that as possible is always a good thing. The only other, I guess, really, really important lesson that I'm learning, and or I've learned and I'm still learning in the process of integrating that into myself, into my soul,
Mm-hmm.
is that you cannot expect your healing to come from outside sources. And by that, I mean, you cannot expect, like what we were talking about earlier, like confronting someone who has traumatized you. Like it could end up being a wonderful catharsis, it could end up being a wonderful healing moment, but more often than not, that's not the case, and it won't be the case.
Right.
Your healing has to come from yourself, and you have to be okay with the possibility that that confrontation may not end the way you'd like it to be. And even if it
Mm.
does, it may not result in the catharsis that you want it to result in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's looking inward and relying on that within yourself. But also, I mean, going back to the found family thing, don't, if you don't have to rely completely on yourself, don't lean on the people who love you, lean on the people who actively want to be there for you and want to
Mm.
be a part of your life and want to help you to become a better person and help you heal, because those are the people that you will keep with you for the rest of your life, and those will be the people that will help to shape you into the person you want to be. and
Yeah.
and and there's never ever anything to be ashamed of in that. Like, lean on folk who, especially if they are there and want to be there and want to help, want to honestly help you.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with taking that hand or taking that shoulder and letting them be that person for you.
Absolutely. Definitely. So I want to thank you for your time here with me.
No, thank you.
I really appreciate your time and your willingness to come out and be vulnerable with all of us. With all that said and done, if you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to like, share, subscribe, give some reviews. It really helps push this message forward. I would really greatly appreciate that. And if you want to help support me, you can go to the link sprucethebruce.xyz and find my links to help support me there. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you guys have a great week. I'll be back here next Sunday with another episode. Stay elevated, my friends.